Good morning, pranam to everyone. I would seek permission from Honorary National President to start the function.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Start.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. On this auspicious occasion of 109th birth anniversary celebration of our beloved founder and founder president, Dr. B. Raman, I welcome you all. May I request all who are not speaking at the moment to please mute their mic. So on this occasion, we have planned a 2-hour session. And this is also inaugural of our webinar series, which will be conducted on every Saturday from 10:30 to 1 p.m. And this is the beginning of that. And our first speaker would be Srimati Gayatri Devi Vasudev, who is also our Honorary National Vice President, and also daughter of Dr. B. Raman. So to begin with, I would request Mr. Pramin Chaturvedi to render the prayer. Mr. Chaturvedi.
Namaskara. Namaha Sabhabhyaha Sabhapatibhyascha Asmin Navottartare Janmados Janmadivas Uplakshye Dr. B. Raman Mahodayanam अस्याः संस्थायाः संस्थापक महोदयस्य स्मृतेः आयोजिते वेबिनार कार्यक्रमे भवतां सर्वेषां हार्दं स्वागतम् अस्ति। अत्र अहं भवतां सर्वेषां मङ्गलमन्त्रान् पठामि। गणनाथ सरस्वतीं रवशुक्रं बृहस्पतिं पञ्चैतानि संस्मरे नित्यं वेदवाणी प्रवर्तते। हरिः ॐ मा भूर्भुवः स्वः गणानां त्वा गणपते गुंहवामहे प्रियाणां त्वा प्रियपते गुंहवामहे निधीनां त्वा निधिपते गुंहवामहे वसो मम आहमजानि गर्भधमा त्वमजासि गर्भधम् अम्बे अम्बिकिं बालिके न पालयति कश्चन सशस्तश्वकः सुभद्रिकां कान्तिलवा शेनीं हरिः ॐ मा भूर्भुवः स्वः सहस्रशीरिखा पुरुखः सहस्राक्षः सहस्रपात सभो विद्वं सर्वतिस्पृत्वा प्रतिष्ठद्दशाङ्गुलं पुरुख एवेदग्ं सर्वं यद्भूतं यच्च भाव्यं भूतामृतत्वश्रीशानो यदन्नेनातिरोहति एतावानस्य महिमादोज्जाजंश्च पुरुखः पादोस्य विश्वा भूतानि त्रिपादस्य मृतं देवी त्रिपादूर्ध्व उदयिपुरुखः पादोस्येहा भवत्पुनः ततो विख्वन् विक्रामत्सासनानसने अभि ततो विराडजायत विराजो आदिपुरुखः स जातु अत्यदिच्यत पश्चाद्भूमिपतो पुरः तस्माद्व्या सर्वभूताः सम्भृतं बृहदाज्यम् पशुंश्चक्रे वायव्यानारण्याग्राम्याश्च जय तस्माद्दन्यात् सर्वभूतानि चाह सामानि जतनीरे छन्दागुंसि जतनीरे तस्माद्युजुस्तस्मादजायत तस्मादस्वा अजायन्ताजिकेषु भयादतः गावो नीरे तस्माज्जाता अजावयः तं जन्यं बर्हिः प्रौक्षन् पुरुखं जातमग्रतः तेन देवा अयजन्त साध्या ऋषयश्च ये जत्पुरुखं जददुः कतिधाव्यकल्पयन् मुखं किमस्यासीत् किं बाहु किमुरूपाद चेते ब्राह्मणस्य मुखमासीत् बाहु राजन्यः कृतः उरूतदश्चद्वैस्यः पद्भ्याद्गुं शूद्रो अजायत चन्द्रमा मनसो जातश्चक्षोः सूर्यो अजायत श्रोत्राद्वायुश्च प्राणश्च मुखादग्निरजायत नाभ्या आसीदन्तरिक्षगुं शेषणोर्द्यौः समवर्तत पद्भ्यां भूवृद्दिशः श्रोत्रास्तथा लोकान् न कल्पयन् जत्पुरुखेण हविखा देवा यज्ञमतन् वतन्तोऽस्यासि दाज्यङ्ग्रीग्मः शरद्धवेः सप्तास्यासन् परिधाय स्त्रीः सप्तसमिधाः कृताः देवा यज्ञजन्तन्वान पुरुखं वसुम् जतनेन यज्ञमयजन्त देवास्तानि धर्माणि प्रथमान्यासन् ते हनाकं महिमानः सचन्त यत्र पूर्वे साध्याः सन्ति देवाः हरिः ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः आकृष्णेन रजसा वर्तमानो निवेशयन् वृतं मर्त्यं च हिरण्ययेन सविता रथेन देवो जाति भुवन्
नानि पश्यन्
गुं सुभद्रं महति छत्राय महति ज्येष्ठाय महति जानराज्य इन्द्रस्य इन्द्रियाय इममुक्ष पुत्रममुक्ष्यै पुत्रवस्यै विष एष भूमि राजा सोमोऽस्माकं ब्राह्मणानागुं राजा ओम अग्निर्मूर्धा दिवाः ककुटपतिः पृथिव्या अयम् अपागुं रेतागुं सेजिन्वति ओम उद्बुद्ध्वसाग्नि प्रतिजाग्रही त्वमिष्टापूर्ति सर्गुं स्रजिथामयञ्च अस्मिन् सधस्थे अद्युतरस्मिन् विश्वे देवा यजमानश्च सीदत ॐ बृहस्पते अतिजदर्जो अरिहादिमद्विभाति क्रतुमज्जनेकु जद्दीदयक्षवसरित प्रजात तदस्मासु द्रविणन्धेहि चित्रम् ॐ अन्नात् परस्रोतो रसं ब्रह्मणा व्यापिवक्षत्रं पयः सोमं प्रजापतिः ऋतेन सत्यमिन्द्रियं विपानगुं शुक्रमन्धस इन्द्रस्येन्द्रियमिदं पायोमृतं मधु Om Shando Devirabhishtaya Apu Bhavantu Pitaye Sanjurabhisravantu Naha Om Kaya Naschitra Avuvaduti Sada Vredha Sakha Gaya Sachishtaya Vrita Om Ketung Granavanna Ketavi Pesho Varja Api Sasi Samukhat Virjayata Brahma Murare Struprantakare Bhanu Shashivu Misuro Budascha Guruscha Graha Shanirahu Ketavaha Sarve Graha Shantikara Bhavantu Surya Shaurya Matindorocha Padavim Sanmangalam Mangalaha Sadbuddhim cha Budho Guruscha Guritam Shukraha Shukham Samshanihi Rahur Bahubalam Karotu Satatam Tetuh Kulasyunnati Nityam Pritikara Bhavantu Bhavati Sarve Nukula Graha Kante Yasala Satkarala Garanam Ganga Jalam Mastake Vamange Raja Tanaya Jaya Bhavani Sati Gandhi Skanda Asi Mandira Satora Chilaguro Murya Sara.
Thank you, Pramanji. Thank you very much for such a beautiful prayer. With this and with this invocation of God Almighty, I welcome our honorary President of ICAS, Shriman B Shukla ji. Along with that, I welcome all the honorary national vice presidents who have joined this webinar, Secretary ICAS, all the chapter chairpersons who have joined, and along with that, all the students or the Jyotish Jigyasus who have come together for this webinar. And just for the information of all the students who have joined, today is the 109th birth anniversary of our founder president, Dr. B.V. Raman. And as you all know that in this modern era, he was the first astrologer who really worked very hard, and he was instrumental in making Vedic astrology known to the Western world. Of course, in India, it was already there. He had authored numerous books, and he was editor of Astrological magazine for a pretty long time. And later on, this legacy was handed over to Srimati Gayatri Devi Vasudev, who is his daughter. And she is now running that magazine in the name of by the name Modern Astrology. And she'll be speaking on one of the topic today after the inaugural address. And I would now request Honorary National President to kindly deliver the inaugural address. Thank you, sir.
Namo Namah Sarvebhyo. I'm really honored and privileged to inaugurate this series for a couple of reasons. First of all, we are all indebted to Dr. B.V. Raman. Whatever we are, wherever we are, all because of Dr. B.V. Raman. So this is such a rena debt which I don't think we can ever repay. Perhaps one of the ways to repay could be to think, as Ishoprasid declares, Isha Vasamidam Sarvam Et Kincham Jagatyam Jagat. Similarly, if every ICASian keeps on thinking that Dr. Raman is in his heart, in his mind, in his functioning, and tries to propagate whatever Dr. Raman lived for, that could be one way we can perhaps repay a part of the rena. It can never be repaid fully, but we have all to make efforts and keep on making efforts to serve cause of astrology, and that we try to serve ideals of Dr. Raman. Today I'm really very happy the way Mr. Pramesh Chaturvedi started this prayer. As perhaps I have told earlier also, Dr. Raman during his last days had started working on the Purush Sukta, and his desire was to search out all the secrets in Purush Sukta. And one day he had confided me that you are already working field of spiritual astrology. Do work on Purush Sukta also. Taking his guidance, his directions, I'm working on Purush Sukta, and maybe in some time I can bring out certain astrological secrets hidden in Purush Sukta. He had asked me to work on Rahim couplet, which I'm already doing. He had asked me to work on certain nadis, which I'm trying to do now. That way I shall also work on a Purush Sukta. Now coming to ICAS and ICASians. As we say, every crisis is an opportunity. So this COVID period has brought us together. By using this virtual platform, the entire India is talking together, working together, so far as ICAS is concerned. Earlier we were confined to our chapters only. Now all the chapters, they are joining hands. These webinars, and here I would like to remind Mr. Navneet, those who want to speak in Hindi, please do allow them also. Their PPTs could be in English, but this language should not become a barrier in bringing everybody together. Because these webinars, North and South have joined hands, East and West have joined hands, this must continue. Even after this offline things start, we must continue with this sort of webinars. And we must try to bring this closeness among the chapters which we have got now. Another thing I would like to say, that we were very lucky to interact with Dr. Raman. I'm reminded of a couplet of Dr. Firaq Gorakhpuri. Once some of his friends asked him, "You have got all the name and fame, and we are with you. In what way we shall be known?" So whatever Firaq told that day is applicable to us so far Dr. Raman is concerned. But our investors, I would like to remind them, kindly do hear very carefully to Shrimati Gayatri Vasudev. After 30-40 years, this young generation shall be proud to say, yes, we have heard Gayatri Vasudev live. We have seen her, we have talked to her. As Firaq told to his friends, कि आने वाली सदियां तुम पर नाज करेंगी ऐ हम अशरों, जब उनको मालूम ही होगा तुमने फिराक को देखा था. The very fact that your firak says you're talking to me, seeing me, it shall be matter of pride in future. So today we are very proud to say yes, we interacted with Dr. Raman. Similarly, after 40 years, you people shall be proud to say कि we have heard गायत्री वासुदेव. हमने गायत्री वासुदेव को बोलते हुए लाइव सुना था, हमने इनके प्रिंसिपल को डायरेक्ट सुना था, हमने इनको देखा था, उनसे बातचीत की थी. इट्स अ मैटर ऑफ प्राइड, प्रिविलेज. तो आज मैं कुछ ज्यादा बोलने वाला नहीं. आज का दिन टोटली मिसेस वासुदेव के नाम पर है. मैं चाहूंगा वो जल्दी विदाउट वेस्टिंग टाइम should come on the mic, should come on the virtual platform and start speaking. Today is her day, and through her we shall try to remember Dr. Raman. That way we shall be passing on the baton to next generation. Now I'm thinking of the next generation. We have done whatever little bit we could do. Time has come to groom the next generation. They must come forward and continue this good work. So with these words, I thank everybody and ask the organizers, please. And before I wind up, let me thank Mr. Rangachari, who has been a great help in organizing the webinar, Mr. Navneet Kaushik, Mr. Vishnath Hula, and Manish Malhotra, who have been working behind the screen to make this event success. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I had intentionally requested Mr. Praveen Chaturvedi to start with the Purush Sukta, because I thought probably in whatever time available to you, you will give us something from Purush Sukta. Of course, हमारी जो पोस्ट विशारद की क्लास है उसमें आपने ऑलरेडी कुछ सूत्र दिए हुए हैं, लेकिन maybe we'll have to wait for it.
Next time, not now.
Yes, sir. So
Not
without
today.
wasting time, I'll request Srimati Gayatri Devi Vasudev to deliver her lecture.
Thank you, Shukla ji. Today is not my day. It is our day of the entire ICAS family. I'm deeply moved to be here with you all. The entire ICAS family, with its national president, Mr. A B Shukla, an intellectual of no mean stature, Justice S.N. Kapoor, who is basically an academician at heart and a fatherly figure to all of us ICASians, our controller of exams, Dr. Anjaneyulu, who has worked ceaselessly and silently for the ICAS, to Mr. Navneet Kaushik, former controller of examinations, Shiv Pankaj Sood, additional controller of examinations, Mr. Manish Malhotra, and Mr. Vishwanath Holla, who helped us with the, let me say, cyber logistics of this event. To all our national vice presidents, our senior national vice president, Sri Bolanath Shukla ji, all chapter chairmen and chairpersons, functionaries of ICAS, faculty members of ICAS, and students. Today is a sacred day being the 109th birth anniversary of our founder, Dr. B. Raman. And it is a matter of great gratification that the entire family of ICAS, from the topmost rungs to the bottom, have been able to assemble through this webinar and celebrate the event. As all of you know, Dr. Raman fought for the cause of Jyotisha as an academic discipline all his life and presented it in all its simplicity and in a form which anyone could learn. He spared no effort to crusade for its rightful place in the Committee of Sciences and present it in all its ramifications. Very few, except perhaps those in the ICAS, understand the scope of Jyotisha as a science touching almost all areas of life. Today, it will be my privilege and honor to share with you all a bird's eye view of the entire gamut of Jyotisha, which touches almost all areas of human life and terrestrial affairs. As you all know, although astrology is one of the oldest sciences known to mankind, in terms of its explored potential, it is still very much in its infancy. There is simply no area of life where astrology cannot be applied without advantage. But this potential has not been tapped sufficiently. Now, such advantage can take the shape of improving matters, or it can help in averting pain, suffering, disaster, and calamity, and in the worst of conditions, being geared for the calamity. The main purpose of astrology is reflected in the Patanjali statement, Dukkham heyam anagatam, or avert the calamity before it strikes. Astrology, we should remember, is basically a tool of foreknowledge. It is like the X-ray, which, though it cannot show all of your insights, can still show some vital details which can help you handle your problems better. So it is with Jyotisha. Its importance in daily life can never be overestimated, and it lubricates life, making it that much more smoother. Now, a subject becomes important when it touches your life in a significant manner. It can touch your life in a constructive way, or it can do it in a destructive manner. Either way, it is the signification that matters. Now, astrology is of great significance in a constructive way. But like the surgeon's scalpel, it can be used both ways, either to heal or to hurt. But then this is true of all sciences. As you all know, Jyotisha comprises of three branches: Siddhanta, Samhita, and Hora. Now, Siddhanta is made up of Ganita and Gola. Ganita is mathematics, Gola is spherical astronomy. Through Siddhanta, we are able to get the data that we need in astrology, and which is always of astronomical information. The second branch is Samhita, and the last branch is Hora. Samhita deals with anything that has to do with large geographical areas or with large groups of people. That way, it covers agriculture, weather, rainfall, natural calamities, national and international developments, epidemics, migrations, wars, or just about anything that influences large sections of people. Now, the last branch is Hora, which is further divided into 3 sub-branches: Jataka. Hora is basically predictive astrology as applied to individuals. Jataka is based on the birth time. Then Prashna is based on the question time. And lastly, Muhurta is identifying a point of time based on planetary parameters as either favorable or unfavorable. Astrology is of tremendous import in forecasting weather and natural calamities, not days and weeks ahead, but months and even years in advance. For this, what is required are teams of astrology. It is unfair to expect a single individual to do work on a global scale. This I'm saying because sometimes when there is an earthquake somewhere in the world, people ask, were you able to predict it? As if an individual can work on a global scale and yet receive stepmotherly treatment, which is what is happening to Jyotisha. Now, only teams can work on such topics like natural disasters. Each team must be assigned one geographical area to cover. This team can draw charts for major transits, eclipses, new and full moon details, and predict the possibility of a natural disaster striking that area, whether it is an earthquake, a cyclone, a hurricane winds, torrential rains, volcanoes, dry spells of drought or famine. Advanced knowledge is invaluable in taking protective measures. Preventive measures may not be always possible, as in the case of cyclones, earthquakes, volcanoes, and such disasters. But at least relief measures can be put in place in advance, and the concerned authorities can be geared for this eventuality. Now, after all, what forecasting does the meteorology department do, on which crores of rupees are being spent by the government? They never forecast. All they do is to report. Do you have to spend so much money on a report that is 99% of the time wrong? In fact, I can look up at the sky myself and say whether it's going to rain or be windy or hot this evening or tomorrow, and I can be as right or wrong as the meteorologist. In fact, I may be even better than the meteorologist. And Dr. Raman, in this area of weather forecasts and natural calamities, has done a lot of work, and some of the details of his work are now available in the book, Astrology in Predicting Weather and Earthquakes. Now, the correctness of his findings have been demonstrated in the earthquakes successfully predicted months before in the pages of the Astrological magazine during his lifetime, and also later in our own journal of modern astrology. Now, based on factors which Dr. Raman has identified, we have been able to anticipate many earthquakes to the date as also the site, that is countrywide, which no seismologist has ever been able to do. Now, modern methods of understanding nature and her angry moods offer very little correct guidance. Volcanoes are part of nature, but they can be very dangerous, destructive, and deadly. Very little is known of the anatomy of volcanoes, and this in modern science. Centuries of study by so-called volcanologists has led to very little information on the why, what, and most importantly, the when of volcanoes. Now, over the past few years, sudden eruptions of volcanoes have killed an estimated 70,000 people. Many scientists have been killed while trying to work at these sites. For instance, Let me share an incident with you. This was in January 1993 when the United Nations sponsored a conference in the South American city of Pasto on volcanoes and their prediction. Papers on this subject of volcanoes and their prediction were to be presented at this conference. And the place of the conference, Pasto, had been specifically chosen precisely because of Galeras, an active volcano close to the city and which had not erupted since July 1992, that is, in the last 6 months. On January 14, 1993, a volcanologist from Arizona State University, he led a team of 9 other scientists, all volcanologists, to the top of the mountain on a study project. So when they reached the top, the head of the team, he stayed on the rim of the volcano at a height of about 4,000 meters. 2 of his colleagues, using ropes, clambered down the volcanic inner core into the crater. One was a Colombian scientist and the other a Russian, and they wanted to sample the gases coming out of the vents. Then yet another scientist of Florida International University had just started taking photographs of his colleagues when, without the slightest warning, the ground heaved and the mountain erupted in a fury of fire. In an instant, the local scientist, the Russian scientist, was killed by a 600-degree blast of toxic gases. Another British geologist and 2 Colombian colleagues were also incinerated as the gas and heat kept spewing in diesel jet. Huge boulders, the size of TV sets, rolled down the hillside, splitting open as they hit the ground. Inside, they were all glowing red. One of these boulders crushed to death the Colombian scientist, and when the volcano had quietened down and rescue teams finished work, only 4 survivors were left. 3 tourists were also burned in this ghastly act of nature. Now, after learning of the death of their colleagues, many of the volcanologists quietly packed their bags and left the city without going back to the conference. It seemed so farcical after the tragedy to continue with the conference. And the scientists, all of them being experts, had been sitting right on top of the volcano, and even one split second before it burst, they could not make out it was boiling underneath. Luckily, at least the head of the team, recovering in hospital, was frank when he said, "The explosion shows how unpredictable these volcanoes are, even for so-called experts like ourselves." Now, coming to astrology, how were the planets placed on that day? You can see for yourself, Mars is at 22 degrees Gemini. Mars is stationary. Jupiter is in 22 degrees Virgo with the moon. Mars is exactly aspecting Jupiter. So the role of Mars in volcanoes is very important. So earthquakes and volcanoes, they are tragic occurrences, and most times we cannot prevent them, but at least if we can anticipate their occurrence well in advance, relief measures or evacuation of large groups of people is quite possible. And as I said before, the movements of Mars, the fiery planet, they give clues as far as volcanoes are concerned. Page 6, is it? When Mars turns direct or retrograde, and certain nakshatras and aspects are involved, then active volcanoes erupt. In this particular case, you will find Mars is at 22 degrees Gemini, Jupiter is at 22 degrees Virgo, Mars is squaring Jupiter to the exact degree. Mars is stationary, which makes him very powerful in his results. Then Mars is in which nakshatra at 22 degrees 57 minutes? Is it Punarvasu? If it is Punarvasu, its ruler Jupiter is again under the square aspect of Mars. So the role of Mars is very important in anticipating volcanoes. Mars's change of sign also has a triggering influence on volcanoes. If you keep track of the Martian movements, whenever Mars moves into an earthy sign like Virgo, Capricorn or Taurus, on the date of the change of sign, you will find there would have been either an earthquake or a volcano in some part of the world. Now, when it comes to earthquakes, planetary alignments between Saturn and Jupiter, between Mars and Saturn, between Mars and Jupiter, that is basically involving the three major planets. Any two of them can make earthquakes strike. As also other major planetary phenomena, especially eclipses, new and full moon factors, they must all be coordinated in specific ways to identify earthquakes. Now, several earthquakes correct to the day and site have been anticipated in the Astrological magazine and also in modern astrology months in advance. Astrology can be very helpful in agricultural operations, especially in places or regions where agriculture is dependent upon the rains. For those of you who have gone through Hora Samhita, an encyclopedic work in content, where its author Varahamihira deals with what is known as Garbhalakshanam or pregnancy of clouds. He devotes 8 chapters to rainfall, and he starts his discussion of rainfall with the following sloka when he says, Annam jagatah pranaha pravutkalasya channamayatam yasmadatah pariksha pravutkalasya prayatnena. As food forms the very life of living beings, and as food is dependent on the monsoons should be carefully investigated. The science of meteorology was highly developed in ancient India. Varahamihira also tells us how to detect the quanta of rainfall based on planetary positions. He says, for example, on the first day of the bright fortnight of Margashira month, that is about November, December each year, on the first day of the bright fortnight of Margashira Shukla Padimi, when the moon, constellation Purvashada, that is Sagittarius, symptoms of pregnancy are to be detected. Now, what are the symptoms of pregnancy of clouds? All these details are given in Hora Samhita, which you can see for yourself at some point of time. Then he also goes on to say, the fetus formed during the moon's stay in a particular constellation will be released 195 solar days thereafter when the moon passes through the same constellation according to the laws of her revolution. Then he also tells us the fetus formed during certain months such as Margashira, that is November and December, and Pausha, that is in January, February, are said to be Mandapalaha, or of little consequence. Clouds formed in the north, pour in the south, and so on. Now, the most occupation of Rohini Nakshatra is particularly significant for sowing operations. Certain crops thrive under certain constellations occupied by the moon for certain periods of time. Now, I shall give you a simple principle which you can all test for yourself. For example, if there is rain on a new moon day, that is an Amavasya, and the succeeding Pratipada or first lunar day, then you can expect good rainfall during the bright half of the rest of the fortnight. If there is rain on a full moon day and the following Pratipada, then there will be no rain in the rest of the fortnight. Using these indications, you can plan not only agricultural activity, but also social and cultural activity, outdoor activity, picnics, cricket matches, soccer matches, social and cultural activities such as marriages, conferences, etc. We have an entire meteorological department working with maybe hundreds or even thousands of staff members, and most of the time, let us say 99.9% of the time, they are wrong. If they only shed their bias and prejudice against astrology and make use of the simple parameters of identifying rainfall or dry weather, the country can gain a lot. Unfortunately, let us hope. Unfortunately, the meteorology department is neglecting Jyotisha, but let us hope sooner or later they will shed their prejudice against ancient India's Jyotisha and take recourse to astrology principles to help them make better forecasts. Now, public health is one more area where astrology can be applied. There are clues to find out when masses of people will fall ill or pray to sickness and health disorders using astrological principles. At such times, the concerned authorities can take precautionary and even emergency measures and be kept ready for any kind of health contingency. For example, again in Hora Samhita, it says when Jupiter precedes Venus, people will be afflicted with throat diseases, but autumnal crops will thrive. Gale gada bhuri bhavecha sharadam. That is, people will suffer from throat ailments, but autumnal crops will be good. If you recall, in September 1994, in Surat, in North India, there was plague, and this plague was not bubonic plague, but lymphatic, affecting the throat area. And if you check the dates in September 1994, September 13, 1994 specifically, Jupiter and Venus were at 22 degrees 40 minutes. After which, because Venus being the faster planet, Venus moved ahead and Jupiter fell behind. And this was exactly the time when in Surat cases of lymphatic plague were reported. I can also draw your attention to the January 2020 issue of Modern Astrology, page 12. This was written in November 2019 and the issue came out in December 2020, wherein we had said, quote, the sixth house rules public health and is not comfortably placed. Ketu there shows endemic infections breaking out. This was based on the Lunar New Year chart for March 24, 2020 and the Indian Independence Horoscope. So as you all know, about the same time, the world was hit by the coronavirus pandemic. Then for outbreak of jaundice on a large scale, Mercury, whether moving into combustion or whether moving out of combustion, should be just behind Venus when jaundice will hit people on a large scale. Pittaja Kamalancha Kurute, that is, Mercury leads to jaundice amongst the public. Now, such advanced information can be of invaluable help in safeguarding public health, especially in developing countries. Now, astrological knowledge is a boon to family planning. Healthy children can be ensured by astrologically timing union. Benefic signs rising with benefics result in healthy children, births of healthy children who also have good longevity. Malefic planets afflicting the rising sign at the time of union may result in mentally retarded or physically challenged children or children with a very short life. So such pregnancies can be avoided by timing union on astrological factors. The same malefic signs can also result in stillbirths and lead to abortions. Sometimes they can also show pregnancy complications. All this is avoidable only if you take care to ensure the union takes place under the influence of benefic signs, with benefics influencing the rising sign. For example, take a horoscope with Cancer Lagna. You have Mercury in Lagna, Moon in the 7th house in Capricorn, Jupiter in the 10th house, Mars and Ketu in the 11th house, Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, Rahu in the 5th house. Shall I repeat the planetary position once again? Lagna rising is Cancer with Mercury in it. Rahu is in the 5th house in Scorpio. Moon in the 7th house in Capricorn. Jupiter in the 10th house in Aries. Mars and Ketu in the 11th house in Taurus. Sun and Venus in the 12th house. Now, since the moon is in Shravana Nakshatra, the dasha at balance is of the moon, then Mars. Let us say it is just at the beginning of Shravana, when the balance of dasha at birth would be about 9 years of moon. Then 7 years of Mars, that is 16 years. Between 16 years and plus 18 years, that is during this period of Rahu Dasha, there will be a tendency to suffer either stillbirths or lose issues through abortions. At such times, what can be done is to wait for the Rahu Dasha to finish, and when Jupiter Dasha begins, they can try for a child. And this is more applicable to female charts than to male charts, because it is the woman who carries the baby in her womb. Now, modern medical advances claim to help childless couples bear children with techniques of assisted conception. But even here, the percentage of success is very, very low. And the cost involved in trying for test tube babies is often prohibitive. And more than that, the emotional trauma a couple has to suffer when assisted conception also fails is unimaginable. There are cases where 2, 3, or even more attempts have failed, leading to utter despair in the couple. All this can be minimized through astrological guidance. I shall share an interesting case with you. As you can make out, this is the horoscope of the wife and then of the husband. The husband, he was working as an editor of a regional edition of a national newspaper. The wife, she was working as a reporter in some journal. The two fell in love and they got married in 1991. Initially, both being working couples or for whatever reason, both did not want a child since they felt their independence could be affected. Then after 5 or 6 years, they kept trying for a child without success. Then they thought of medically assisted conception, but they feared this would expose the woman to powerful medications about which they were wary. So they sought astrological advice. So in this particular case, taking up the woman's chart, as you know, the 5th house is for progeny or children. Here, the ascendant being Leo, the 5th house is Sagittarius, occupied by Mercury, 2nd and 11th lord, and the moon, 12th lord. And it is aspected by Jupiter from the 11th house. Jupiter is a natural benefit. Jupiter is also a 5th lord. These are the planetary positions relating to the 5th house of the woman. What I found was the moon is the 12th lord, not too good, and in the 5th house. So I felt it could lead to delay. But the moon is also a planet who rules fertility. So the womb or the woman is fertile. Then there is Mercury in the 5th house. As 2nd lord, it's not relevant. As 11th lord or Labhasthanadipati, Mercury in the 5th, I thought should be good. Now, when you talk of Labhasthana, it is not necessarily confined to monetary benefits or profits, but advantages. So in this case, 11th lord Mercury in the 5th also does not rule out truncating. Then Jupiter is aspecting the 5th as 5th lord, which is good. Then Jupiter, 5th lord, and 11th lord, Mercury are in a parivartana or exchange of signs, which is welcome. But you find Jupiter is in a sandhi. Has it become weak? Initially, because being retrograde makes him strong again. So my conclusion was that they could get the child without medical aid. And since the woman was due to pass through Moon Dasha, Mercury Bhukti during the reproductive years of her life, I said, you please wait. Once these planetary periods begin of Mercury and Moon Dasha and Mercury Bhukti, you should be able to get a child. Then moving on to the husband's chart. Even the husband's chart should hold promise of children. Here, the ascendant is Libra. And the 5th house is Aquarius, occupied by Saturn. Then the 5th house is aspected by 11th Lord Sun and also 9th and 12th Lord Mercury. Now there is Saturn in the 5th as 5th Lord, which is not too good. Saturn is always a planet of delay, and though in his own sign he may not be particularly helpful in regard to progeny matters. But here, of course, it's not written here. Saturn, being in the seventh from the moon, is in Ativakra or retrogression. So Saturn is powerful in his own way, being retrograde. He is aspected by 11th Lord Sun. 11th is again Labhasthana, and then he is aspected by Mercury. Mercury is 9th and 12th Lord. As 9th Lord, he rules Bhagyasthana. His aspect in the 5th house is good for the blessing of a child. So, since the husband was also due to pass through Sun Dasha Mercury Bhukti between September 2004 and July 2005, I said you can wait till that period and it is likely you will get a child. And as astrologically anticipated, a child was born to them on 26th November 2004 without medical help. Another factor which influenced my judgment was the ascendant is Libra. The 4th house you all know is Sukhasthana. Sukhasthana means it rules domestic happiness. And domestic happiness, according to most cultures in the world, is incomplete without a child in the family. So I thought that factor, Lagnadipati Venus, aspecting the 4th house of Sukhasthana, should also help in the couple getting their child. So this is how we can apply astrology to cases where modern medicine cannot help at all. Note that in both cases, Labhadipati Sun and Mercury are involved. And Labhasthana, we must remember, is not confined to material or monetary gains. It can show advantages, the exact nature being based on the entire chart. Now, many childless couples who have gone to doctors with great hope of having their own child through medically assisted conception would often seek astrological help after failing in spite of 2 or 3 attempts. In fact, 7 was the maximum, and after expending thousands of dollars and lakhs of rupees. In fact, there was this Indian couple in the USA which tried 7 times and failed to get a child even after spending lakhs of US dollars. They were thoroughly frustrated and angry with the medical fraternity for misleading them with false hopes. The couple grew so disillusioned, they renounced everything and joined an ashram in India. Now, many childless couples take astrological help before taking a decision on medically assisted conception. Many a time where the 5th house and a running dasha are well placed and the 9th house, especially in the female chart, is well disposed, a child has been possible without recourse to medical assistance, simply with a change in the dasha, bhukti and gochara or transits. Now, female horoscopy is a very important area of Jyotisha. Now, most classical works on Jyotisha devote an entire section to female horoscopes under what is known as Sri Jataka. The emphasis in all these texts is not so much on dosha or affliction in the female chart, but rather on how to handle it. The running theme throughout is that a dosha-ridden chart need not be rejected. It can be set right by pairing it with a chart with similar doshas or afflictions. Now, you will understand marriage, whether it is a male or a female chart, has a major say in deciding the quantum of happiness in an individual's chart life. A wrong choice can throw life completely out of gear, and by the time this is righted by either annulling the marriage or through some other means, many years would have been wasted and also much energy dissipated. Marriage is an area, whether in a male or a female chart, which, if badly made, can prove to be a very, very costly mistake. Now, irrespective of the race or culture one may belong to, women, as a rule, do lay great store by the man they may marry or love and live with. Their high point is the emotional loyalty they have for their spouses. In fact, according to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, sloka 34, Lord Krishna describes in describing the various manifestation of divinity, he says, Kirtihi Shrirvak Chanarinam Smritir Meda Drutir Kshama. That is, in women, divinity is present in the form of fame, fortune, speech, memory, intelligence, constancy, endurance, or forgiveness. And all these attributes constitute a woman's mind. But the Lord does not say anything, He doesn't say the same of men, right? But this is not the time to go into these details. But we must remember the female mind is very different from the male mind. So, in a case where the loyalty of the woman is betrayed, the woman gets totally shattered. Or when a relationship terminates due to death or other reasons, the woman herself passes through the most painful phase of her life. Perhaps the karmic factor can explain why some are born as women and have to suffer so much more than men do for the same reason. Therefore, women, with all their abilities, intellectual or artistic and other, they have certain disadvantages which are inborn and which they must bear, especially because their emotional constitution is that way. That is why the subject of loss of spouse is given specific treatment under Sri Jataka in almost all classical works on Jyotisha. And they also sound a note of caution that great care must be exercised in examining the Mangalya Bhava in a female chart. And this is because the woman is always more vulnerable in life than a man. Feminists may argue men and women are equal. Nature has made them such that they cannot be equal. It doesn't mean one is superior to the other. It only means they are different. And they are different, but at the same time, the woman is always more vulnerable. I will give you a very simple example. We find reports in newspapers and the media of girls, women being raped. Very unfortunate. Nobody justifies it. But we hardly ever find a report where a man is raped by a woman, which itself proves that women are more vulnerable than men. Then again, physically, a woman is constitutionally more delicate. Biologically, she has a great role to play in the continuity of preservation of the human species, and her body is specially designed by nature for this all-important role. Astrologically, therefore, an examination of certain factors in the chart to assess the capability to play this role must be made. Then, rearing the child is a gift a woman naturally has. The period from childbirth to the growing years or adolescent stage of the child has a big impact on the happiness of the woman. What does the chart say about this period in her life? You can get clues to this astrologically and be geared for whatever is shown in your horoscope. Will she have to cope with trouble-prone kids, sickly kids, single parenting, or will she be blessed with obedient, affectionate, healthy children. In the choice of a marital partner, the role of astrology is simply invaluable. The family, we all know, is the building block of society, and a stable husband and wife relationship can do more to stabilize and solve social problems than all the psychiatric counseling and police forces put together can. Almost 50% or even maybe more of youth who take to crime, alcohol, promiscuousness, perverted styles of life, drugs are the products generally of a broken home. If the soundness of the home is ensured, then the soundness of the mental health of society is automatically taken care of. This is possible only if the marriage endures, not simply endure, but also is founded on mutual faith, trust, and love. And this is possible by matching charts between people of similar or compatible astrological factors. Then marital counseling can save many marriages from breaking up. And the worst casualty when a marriage breaks up is the child in the family who develops permanent psychological scars. Such children, when they grow up, also face severe marital problems. Astrology is a boon in such cases. In India, the majority of marriages are still contracted on the basis of birth charts. And the percentage of stability here is far higher than in cultures where marriages overlook the astrological factors. For example, there are combinations which produce what are called Vishakanya yogas or deadly combinations. Of course, this covers men and women both. It is not confined to only women. It is Vishakanya or Vishakumara also. And such natives, whether male or female, they carry a train of disaster, suffering, unhappiness, disease, and tragedy. So, when one is about to take an objective decision on a marital proposal, they are best avoided for marriage, for sharing one's life with them. Such natives carry a destiny of tragedy, privation, problems that never seem to end. Why would anyone want a life? Why would anyone want such a life when they can take an objective decision in finalizing a marital proposal? Now, there are certain nakshatras, Mula, Aslesha, Vishaka, and Jyeshtha, which are tabooed. Many people are afraid to marry girls born under these nakshatras, as they believe they are harmful to certain relations in their family. Girls born under Mula, they say, is harmful for the father-in-law. And Aslesha for the mother-in-law. Jyeshtha for the husband's elder brother. And Vishaka for the husband's younger brother. We must remember, as students of astrology, we cannot come to a conclusion on any one single factor, and the chart as a whole must be examined and should not be dismissed simply because the girl is born in one of these nakshatras. But I have seen in a large number of cases where the male is born in these nakshatras, and also in the charts of girls in these nakshatras, the relatives indicated against each of these nakshatras, they have died much before their time. It's not that, there is no cause and effect relationship here. It is only a correspondence or a correlation, because the relative who dies, let us say for Mula, it is the father-in-law. The father-in-law father-in-law's own Janma Patrika would be showing death for him at that point of time. The girl with Mula Nakshatra does not cause it. And these are some misconceptions that are doing the rounds for centuries. And especially, when people go to these temple priests and ask them to match horoscopes, they will look only at the Kuta agreement at the nakshatras and say the count is only 15 not good, or count is 36 or very good, and so on. So without a good background of astrology, without understanding the entire chart from different angles, one cannot dismiss any of these nakshatras as bringing or causing harm to the concerned relatives. Therefore, synthesizing a conclusion on diverse astrological factors is a very fine art and has to be cultivated with gradual practice. Now, in nakshatras, you also have this Gana classification into Manusha, Deva, and Rakshasa Gana. Kritika, Aslesha, Makka, Chitta, Vishaka, Jyeshta, Mula, Dhanishta, Shatabisha. They are described as Rakshasa Gana Nakshatra. Some people, immediately they see a chart with this nakshatra, then they shy away from it when considering a marital proposal. But what is the actual nature of these nakshatras, and how is this classification relevant or important to us? If the moons of those born in Rakshasa Gana Nakshatras are afflicted by papagrahas or malefics, then such people are very difficult to get along with. They may be schizophrenic, violent, hysterical, paranoid, deeply suspicious, and if the afflictions are very severe, they can also have homicidal tendencies. And even otherwise, such natives, they usually tend to show pettiness and cruelty in their responses, especially when under stress. They're not evil or difficult to get along with all the time, but most times, especially under stress, these negative traits surface. But those born under Deva Nakshatras, even under stress, show an innate honesty, decency, and restraint in their responses. This is how we have to understand the Gana's classification of nakshatras. Then coming to those born in Manusha Gana nakshatras, they come somewhere midway between the Rakshasic and the Daivic. And they're not as bad as Rakshasa Ganas, nor as good as Devagana people. However, we must remember these traits are not there all the time, but surface only under stress, and they have to be modified on the basis of the entirety of the horoscope and not only on the single factor of an isolated moon Janma Nakshatra. Then there is Yoni Kuta, which deals with one's sexual appetite. If paired wrongly, it generally does not help in marital peace. All these are factors that to some extent can add to or detract from the quality of life. Now, counseling on the basis of astrology can also prepare one to face loss of spouse by death where indicated. Now, where physical danger is foreseen in a young man's or a woman's chart, where a bad period is ahead and shows death, violence, or protracted suffering, it can be avoided or at least diffused in its intensity by pushing marriage to after this period. One can also plan the right time to marry so as to avoid any adverse indications in the horoscope. Now, in this case, which is before you, the girl got married in May 1993 and the husband died in December 1993. you will see there is Rahu in the 4th house in Sukhasthana, which is not a good feature. If you take the Chandra Lagna, Rahu is in the 8th house, not good again. The loss of husband, the death of the husband, took place in Saturn Dasha Rahu Bhukti. Saturn is of course the Lagna lord, but there is one exception we must all remember, that Saturn Rahu periods, whether Saturn Dasha Rahu Bhukti or Rahu Dasha Saturn Bhukti, can bring in very difficult circumstances in most cases. In this case, Rahu is in Sukhasthana from Lagna, which is disastrous for domestic happiness. He is in the 8th from Chandra Lagna, which is a Vaidavya Yoga or a yoga for loss of spouse. So, in this case, what could have helped was if only they had waited for Rahu Bhukti to finish, maybe they could have saved the girl from widowhood. That is one point. Another point is, if the matching of doshas had also been taken care of, then there would not have been widowhood for the girl. Though during the period of Saturn and Rahu, there could have been some difficult circumstances, but because of the matching of doshas, which is very important, they could have overcome those doshas and moved into the next bhukti. Next, please. Now, sexual abuse. Nowadays, the paper, the media is constantly reporting cases of sexual abuse, especially of small children also, sometimes by people you trust, relatives, cousins, friends, neighbors, even family doctors. How does one safeguard one's child from such predators? If the child is in Rahu Dasha or Rahu Bhukti, Ketu Dasha or Ketu Bhukti, or an afflicted Venus Dasha or Bhukti, or of a Dasha of an afflicted planet in the 7th house, then the child would be vulnerable to such dangers. The period of a Badaka planet can also cause such results, as also of the 7th lord or planets in the 7th house. Instead of getting wiser after such a mishap, one can always be a little extra careful during such astrological periods and not leave the child alone with others. Vulnerable periods are of Rahu, Dasha or Bhukti, of Ketu, Dasha or Bhukti, of Venus, Dasha or Bhukti, Bhadaka, Dasha or Bhukti, 7th occupant, if the 7th is afflicted. All of these bring one under the possibility of the crime of vulnerability. They bring the native, make the native vulnerable to sexual crime. Then of course vulnerable days. Tuesdays are vulnerable, Chaturdashis, especially of the dark fortnight and also of the bright, but the dark fortnight is more dangerous. Amavasyas or new moon days, then eclipse days, then days of malefic conjunctions or aspects, plus Chandrastama days in the individual chart. These are all sensitive periods when one must be very careful if there are indications for sexual crime in the child's horoscope. Now in this case, next. In this case, the natives suffered her father's brother's abusive behavior in her teens. This was in Rahu Dasha, Venus Bhukti. Now we will find Rahu is in the 3rd house, which is said to be quite a good place for Rahu to occupy. Yes, there's no doubt about that. But Rahu is in a Mercury ruled sign. And Mercury should reflect the results of Mercury also. And Mercury in turn is in the 7th house with the Sun. And the seventh house, as I said, also rules sexual matters. Then this was in Rahu Dasha, then Venus Bhukti. Venus is in the eighth house, which is a Dusthana, which itself is not a good place for Venus to occupy. Venus is in Shatabisha, ruled by Rahu again. Venus is in a Papakartari yoga. So in Venus Bhukti, while she suffered the abusive behavior from her father's brother, that is her uncle, the Papakartari yoga made her helpless. She was scared to talk about it to her parents. But when she broached it to her mother, unfortunately, the mother said, all these things happen, don't talk of it to anyone. So by being careful on the days, which we have listed in the previous slide, and taking note of certain planetary positions in one's chart, especially in the case of girls, one can indeed avoid such tragedies. Now, many people ask, what is the use of knowing your future? They believe astrology is, they equate astrology with knowing your future. Astrology is not just knowing your future, it is taking control of your present and planning your future. Even young people, if carefully counseled, can be trained in using astrological factors to be on guard. Here is another instance on January 26, 1994. It was a Shukla Chaturdashi day. A young girl with some friends went for a picnic in Bangalore, and she suffered a traumatic experience, and the whole thing ended up as a police case with two young men, her friends, being arrested for the offense of rape. If the parents had made a reference to the chart of the girl, but unfortunately they did it only after the mishap occurred, then the tragedy could have been averted simply by skipping the picnic on Chaturdashi day and staying safely at home. Adverse indications, we as students of astrology must remember, are not absolute and can be averted by preventive and precautionary measures. Now, please listen very carefully. Such measures are not confined only to japa, shanti, homa, etc., but more importantly, also include simple common sense steps. Now, next, drugs. Drugs are ruining countless young lives. Many parents do not even suspect of what their child is doing until the worst is over. What combinations give a young man or a woman a predisposition to drugs, alcohol, promiscuousness can be identified horoscopically and the parents warned. Preventing measures, if resorted to well in advance, can help prevent such addictions. And for all such cases, Rahu and Mars play a very important role. And their periods especially can make one addiction prone. Rahu, Mars, afflicted Venus, Venus Ketu, Venus Rahu, Venus Mars also sometimes can make one prone to addictions. Then another area where astrology is a very great help in a practical sense is education. By a careful study of the horoscope, a child's intellectual abilities can be gained. If he has a powerful fifth house or a powerful Mercury, he will be a brilliant student. Likewise, there are other factors which show the intellectual limitations of a child when it can be put into courses that are not very exacting and tough. In fact, parental pressure to make achievers of their children is not always congenial or healthy. I'm sure many of you would have experience with the mothers or the fathers pushing their children to study all the time. And due to this, the children also suffer psychological trauma. Though every parent would like one's child to excel, this eagerness, if modified through astrological understanding of the chart, of the limitations of the child's chart, can pave the way for more happiness and less tension at home. Then business investments. Business investments can also be planned on astrological factors. For every single case of a successful businessman, of a successful industrialist, there would have been hundreds of unsuccessful ruined men. Such tragedies can be averted using the horoscope. Dhana yogas are yogas for financial success. If these yogas are not present in a chart, one is ill-advised to go in for business. And the best Dhana yogas are when the 9th and 11th houses are connected, the 9th, 2nd and 11th houses are connected, when one can venture on business. For instance, take the chart of Mukesh Ambani. I will read out the planetary positions. It is Libra rising with Rahu in Lagna. Saturn retrograde is in the 2nd house. Moon is in Sagittarius. Mercury, Venus, Sun, Ketu are in the 7th house in Aries. Mars is in the 8th house. Jupiter is in the 12th house, retrograde. You will easily see he is one of the richest men in the country. And he is into different businesses, all of which are doing very well. The Lagna has Rahu in Libra. It is aspected by Lagnadipati, which itself is good in the first place. Then Venus, Lagnadipati, is with 9th Lord Mercury, which is good. Venus, Lagnadipati, is with 11th Lord Mercury, which is also good. Then 9th Lord Mercury is with 11th Lord Sun, exalted Sun, which is also desirable. 2nd Lord Mars is in the 8th house, but aspecting the 2nd house and aspected by Yoga Karaka Saturn. Then Jupiter, as 3rd and 6th Lord, being placed in the 12th house, that also helps the financial basis of the horoscope. So unless you can locate some good Dhana yogas in the chart, it is best not to venture into business unless you want to end up with huge losses and loans. Then another area where astrology is of great consequence is in crime detection. Now, detection of crime and potential perpetrating of crime is an area which can benefit greatly from astrology. Malefics, particularly the Sun, Mars, Rahu, Ketu, and an ill-associated Mercury, have a major role to play in crime. These planets, if they are reflecting the moon adversely, you know the moon is the Manahkaraka or natural significator of the mind, or the 4th house, which rules the heart, the emotional heart, or the intentions of an individual, and therefore capable of providing insights into the main sphere of the accused or suspect. They give us clues to criminal streaks in a horoscope. We must differentiate between the moon, who is Manahkaraka, Manas is basically emotions, and Mercury, who is basically the significator of intellect or the faculty which discriminates. Mercury rules Buddhi or the discriminative faculty, as against the moon, who rules emotions. Emotions are spontaneous, Buddhi takes time, it reflects, discriminates between what is good or what is bad, and therefore it comes under Mercury, and an afflicted Mercury gives a defective Buddhi or an inclination to make wrong decisions. Where the moon is highly afflicted, but Mercury is well placed, then the native's mind may be a veritable hell of negative emotions like hate, jealousy, suspicion, greed, and wrath. But he may refrain from acting criminally by giving vent to his passions for the simple reason Mercury will hold him back by an instinctive appraisal of the pros and cons of such action. Where the moon and Mercury are both afflicted and receive no helpful or stabilizing influences, then the turbulent emotions get translated into violent behavior and acts. Now, this is about individual charts, but there are periods when there is a spurt in crime defined by planetary parameters. When criminal minds, that is, people with afflicted charts, receive stimulus to commit crime, you will understand and you will agree that no criminal commits a crime every day of the year or all the time or every hour of the day. The mental makeup for crime is in him in seed form in the horoscope. And as soon as the planetary environment outside reaches a particular pattern, on that day, at that point of time, the crime is committed. In the victim's case, apart from Dasha Bhukti Gochara, Chandrastama days are very important as making one vulnerable to crime. Now, what are the factors that precipitate the act of crime? Tuesdays are, as a rule, crime producing or crime propelling days. Amavasyas or new moon days are also crime oriented days, you can say, these. Then the Chaturdashi, the 14th lunar day, especially of the dark half, that is preceding Amavasya, and to some extent of the bright half also. The Chaturdashi of the bright half is not as bad as the Chaturdashi of the dark half. Then Ashtamis or the 8th lunar day in both bright and dark fortnights. Then Navamis or the 9th lunar day in both dark and bright fortnights. These are all sensitive periods when those with Moon and Mercury afflicted may tend to commit some kind of crime. And then there are certain 10-degree arcs in the zodiac known as Ayudha, Sarpa, Pasha, and Nigala Drakanas. When the moon crosses any of these Drakanas, then also the conditions become favorable for crime. Then the moon's passage through nakshatras ruled by the moon, sun, Mars, Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn also are crime prone. Then likewise, when Mars, Saturn, Rahu or Ketu afflict the weekday lord, let us say Friday, ruled by Venus, Rahu, and Venus is moving towards a conjunction with Rahu. At such times, Fridays become crime prone. So when these conditions prevail, the climate becomes ripe for a crime. And more the number of such conditions coming together, the more the number of crimes, or greater the gravity and goriness of the crime. In the case of the victim, apart from the Dasha Bhukti Gochara factors, Chandrastama periods make one more vulnerable to crime. What I would suggest is, if you have made a note of all these factors that are crime producing either in individuals or making them vulnerable to crime, I suggest you can check the newspaper reports every Wednesday morning. More crimes will be reported as having taken place on the previous day, Tuesday. Likewise, you just make a note of newspaper reports on days after Amavasya and also Paurnami. You will find again there will be a spurt in crimes on the preceding Chaturdashi, especially that preceding Amavasya, and it would have stimulated crime-prone tendencies and consequent crimes. So during these vulnerable periods that are related to Rahu, Ketu, Venus, Dashas or Bhuktis. For that, the potential for being vulnerable to crime should be already present in the birth horoscope of the native. At such times, if it is Rahu, it is usually a hate crime or a property crime or a crime due to greed. It can be for money or whatever reason. If the period is related to Venus, generally it will be a sex crime. If with Ketu, as in the case of Rahu, it will be related to hate, anger, jealousy and greed. Now I was talking about these Drakanas. These are all 10-degree arcs in the zodiac, and only some of the signs and some of these decanates, as they're known in English, are identified as being prone to violence. Either they may trigger violence or they may make one vulnerable to violence. So when the transit moon is passing through Ayudha, Sarpa and Nigala Drakanas, and also Pasha Drakana, then it is a sensitive period. If you have a chart that shows vulnerability to crime, the third Drakana of Simha, the third Drakana of Aries, of Sagittarius, of Libra, Gemini, all these are Ayudha Drakanas. Likewise, the first Drakana of Sagittarius, the first Drakana of Aries, the second Drakana of Gemini, the second Drakana of Virgo. Even if you take up the case of murders and all, you will find these Drakanas will be operative in the charts of those murders, the victims of murder, either relating to their 8th house or the 7th house. Then there are also Sarpa Drakanas, the first of Scorpio, the third of Cancer, the third of Pisces, all of which are supportive of crime, either as perpetrator of crime or as victim of crime. Then Pasha Drakana, the second of Scorpio, Nigala Drakana, the first of Capricorn. When these conditions prevail, the climate becomes right for a crime. And the more the number of such conditions coming together, the more the number of crimes committed, or the greater the goriness of the crime committed. Now, traffic accidents. Those that we have identified for crime, they are also sensitive in the sense they can lead to traffic accidents. And more especially when these factors are in operation, even people who are, okay and stable, they may suddenly accelerate their speed on the road or suddenly make up their mind to cross the road when a vehicle is coming and hurt themselves. Such days are Tuesdays, Navamis, Chaturdashis and Amavasyas. Chaturdashi as always, I would emphasize that preceding Amavasya more than that preceding Paurnami. So, on Navamis, Tuesdays, you should be careful not to jump the traffic lights or to park your car in non-parking zones when you could get into trouble. And of course, for aerial accidents, Mars is especially in the Aries signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, but more especially in Gemini, which is also the third sign of the zodiac and shows journeys, aerial journeys because of its airy nature. Most aircraft accidents usually occur on Tuesdays or when Mars is in Gemini. At such times, when you say, what is the use of knowing all this? What I'm trying to say is, when such factors are prevalent, the police, the traffic police can be geared for more people breaking rules or for accidents of varying degree. And both the police and also the people can watch out for these days by being prepared for accident victims by having ambulances ready, rare blood groups ready, when the intensity of such accidents can be diluted. And as always, the Chandrastama day, with reference to the individual chart, is always a time to be extra careful. Though it is not very relevant now, what I suggest is, even in families, when the husband and wife use tempers and quarrel, you will find usually that happens in the Chandrastama days of one of the couple. If they are in the same Rashi, then the Chandrastama day for them is usually fraught with tensions and misunderstandings and anger. Now, medical diagnosis. Astrology is of great help in both medical diagnosis and prognosis. You know, Ayurveda is the ancient Indian system of health. In fact, it really means the science of life. Unlike modern medicine, which is the science of disease. And in Ayurveda, regulation is the key to health, and such regulation covers achara or daily lifestyle, vichara, right mental thinking, ahara or regulation in food, and vyavhara or regulation and moderation in mundane activity. In fact, an Ayurveda is supposed to be proficient in Jyotisha also. Many medications and pills are to be prepared only under certain astrological combinations and nakshatras in particular when their potency becomes maximum. Now, astrology is based on the theory of karma, law of karma and the theory of rebirth, and it traces all disease to wrong acts of omission or commission from past lives. Now, whether you like it or not, you have to accept the law of karma and the theory of rebirth on which the whole edifice of astrology is built. Everywhere you see so many inequalities, and if God is said to be perfect, why is he creating such inequalities? You will realize an Ambani's son is born with a lot of advantage, while a beggar's child is born with a lot of disadvantages. Why all these differences if God is perfect, if God is just? All these inequalities can be explained only by the law of karma and the theory of rebirth. Now, according to the law of karma, it says, Janmantara kritam papam yadi rupena jayate tachantir aushadair danai japahomarchanadibihi. That is, diseases are the resultant of actions from past life. They can be alleviated through medicine, aushadhi, dana, japa, and homa, and other ritually prescribed measures. Now, certain basic features of strength in a chart give lifelong health. Other reflections can show vulnerability to disease and malady. A strong malefic influencing the ascendant makes it vulnerable to disease. And then afflictions to different planets can show disease in different organs and parts of the body. If the sun is afflicted, you have heart-related ailments or of the eyes. And if the sun is in the 7th, usually one suffers from liver problems. Whenever a heart surgery is recommended by the medical fraternity, if you take a look at the horoscope and you find the sun is well placed, then you can say that surgery is totally uncalled for. The doctors will tell you, if you don't go through the surgery, we can give you only a 6 months time or 3 months time and so on. But if in the chart the sun is not afflicted and the chart shows good longevity, then there is no need for any medical interception in the form of surgery to handle the case. If there is some symptom, it may be due to gas or a transit, and once the transit comes to an end, the sun or the heart would be quite comfortable and healthy. Then if the moon is afflicted, there would be mental and psychological problems. The moon being the Manahkaraka. If Mercury, then convulsions, epileptic fits, and other nervous disorders, as Mercury rules the central nervous system. Then Mars afflicted causes rashes, boils, skin eruptions, ulcers, wounds, all of which can be traced to toxins in the blood. Mars basically rules the blood and also marrow. Then Saturn, if influenced by malefics, you get joint-related diseases, arthritis, bone dislocation, and backache. With Jupiter, one is prone to rheumatic pains, diabetes, and swellings, obesity. And with Venus, usually it is urinary problems, eye infections, sexual problems, and skin diseases. When the moon, Rahu, and Ketu are involved and adversely placed, there can be physical conditions which may escape proper diagnosis, but more often than not, they give rise to serious mental problems and psychological complexes. The planets in the 6th house can also point to specific disorders. If the sun is in the 6th, one is prone to gastritis, burning, dyspepsia. And you know, the sun rules bile. So by treating the bile through Ayurvedic medication, one can get relief. The moon in the 6th shows weak digestion, loose motions, and what is known as irritation bowel syndrome. And you know, irritation bowel syndrome is always said to happen or come out when one is stressed. And one is stressed only when the moon is afflicted. So there is this connection between the moon and IBS, as it is known, irritation bowel syndrome. Then with Mars in the 6th, one is prone to hyperacidity, burning sensation in the stomach, biliousness, and ulcers. Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus in the 6th do not harm health much unless there are other afflictions. With Saturn, Saturn usually gives severe constipation, fissures, and anal problems. Rahu Ketu in the 6th are generally said to be good, but they may cause weak stomach, but they're not, indicative of any serious condition. But here there is the clause. If Rahu and Ketu are with some other planet in the 6th house, then they can show a serious health condition in the appropriate dasha and bhukti. Of course, these equations which I have spelled out for you are oversimplified. You have to, as a rule, take note of the entire chart before coming to a conclusion. Now, while the planetary factors, positions give a clue as to the nature of ailment one may suffer from, the onset of the problem or the health complaint can be known by the dasha or bhukti or planet occupying or ruling or aspecting the 6th house. Now, if such a period coincides with the adverse transits of Saturn, like the 1st, 12th, 1st and 2nd or Sadhe Sati, the 7th and 8th when it comes under Ashtama Shani, or the 4th when Saturn in the 4th from the moon brings the chart under what is under Artha Astama, then you can expect a serious health condition is lurking somewhere in your body. But if the indication for the disease is not very strong, there are favorable influences on the factors causing the health condition or pointing to the health condition, then with the change of bhukti or even transit sometimes, the condition automatically resolves itself with palliative treatment and there is no need to go into strong forms of treatment. And usually surgery is surgery is advised at the drop of a hat by the medical fraternity. Most times it is unnecessary, and this has been proved in countless charts that have been examined and which have come out of health conditions without undergoing surgery as advised by the doctors. Now in this case, Chart 5 is of a male who in October 1989 started getting a sore throat. So initially they tried home remedies like gargling with salt water and all that. It didn't work. Then they went to a general physician. He also prescribed some medication. It didn't work. Then they went to an ENT specialist who diagnosed it as cancer of the throat. And then the doctor said, this is cancer of the throat. We advise surgery. If operated, we will have to remove the sound box and vocal cords, and you will not be able to speak. And then we'll make a hole in your throat to help you breathe. Otherwise, you may not live long. Now, it was a very tough time for the family and a very difficult decision had to be made. According to the doctor, if he went through the surgery, he would lose his voice box, sound box, and vocal cords and not be able to speak. And there would be a hole in his throat to help him breathe. Otherwise, the other option was, he should be prepared for death. At this juncture, an examination of the chart helped them come to a safe decision. Here you have the ascendant Gemini occupied by Saturn. Saturn is the 8th lord, Dusthanadipati. He is a 9th lord also, a favorable planet. He is in Lagna. The ascendant lord, Mercury, is in the 11th house. 11th is the house of advantages, Lavasthana, which is good. So Saturn in the ascendant is partly benefic and partly malefic. Then what the doctors had said, the sound box would be removed and he would not be able to speak, right? So the second house was examined. It is Rahu, a malefic, 6th lord Rodasthanadipati, Mars in nature, malefic, and exalted Jupiter in the second house, who is a benefic and a strong benefic. The second lord Moon is in the 4th house. The Moon receives no aspects or associations, and he is free of any aspect or association, and he gets what is known as Digbala in the 4th house. So the second lord in the 4th house is well placed. And this trouble started in Jupiter Dasha, Mars Bhakti. Jupiter is in the 2nd house, Mars is in the 2nd house. So at that time, the transits were Saturn in Capricorn, Rahu and I think Cancer, Ketu in Capricorn. Sorry, Saturn and Rahu were in Capricorn, Ketu was in Cancer, transit Jupiter was also in Cancer. After taking note of all these factors, the conclusion was the second Lord Moon in the 4th is strong without affliction, so it is unlikely that he will lose his voice. Lagnadipati Mercury is in the 11th house. Saturn as 9th Lord is in the Lagna, which is good. Saturn as 8th Lord in Lagna has created this condition, which is not good. Then the condition or problem started in Mars Bhakti of Jupiter Dasha. It was found Jupiter transit Jupiter in Cancer, transit Ketu in Cancer. Then Saturn and Rahu were in Capricorn transit-wise. So it was hoped that since the chart did not show premature death or loss of voice, the surgery was not needed. And it was suggested that in January 1991, there was a Saturn-Rahu conjunction in Capricorn waiting to happen. So we said, let this conjunction be over. And then, by then Jupiter, transit Jupiter would also move out of Cancer, where he was afflicted by Ketu. With these transits taking place, you should be returning to normal health with only palliative treatment. Surgery is not needed. The patient's family accordingly decided not to go through the surgery, and then they went in for palliative treatment. The doctors, of course, understandably were very upset. Their expert opinion had been discarded, and they said, we will not be responsible if something terrible happens to you. And in January 1991, after Saturn-Rahu conjunction was over and they started moving away, Jupiter had moved into Leo by then, releasing the Dasha of Jupiter, and Mars was freed of Ketu's transit influence. The patient recovered, and it was in 2001 that he came again to me and said, I'm still alive in spite of not going through the surgery. And in 2021, a few months ago, again he met me when he said, even after 20 years after what the doctor said, I'm still alive. How can you trust doctors? He said. I said, it's your problem, but your chart has been helpful. And that is how astrology has to be made use of. Next. Next. Astrology is of great help in as far as psychological guidance is concerned. And this becomes very important, especially in families when handling youngsters whose behavior may be wayward. The moon and its associations give a clue to the mental disposition of a native. Next. The planet with which the moon associates changes one's behavioral pattern according to its own significations. If the moon is with the sun, one is egoistic and conceited. If the moon is with Mars, one is short-tempered, harsh and selfish. If Jupiter and Moon are together, one is kind, sober, stable, and understanding in nature. If the Moon is with or aspected by Saturn, one is serious-minded, pessimistic in thinking, and given to unnecessarily worrying. If the Moon is with or aspected by Venus, one is generally good-natured and friendly. Then if the Moon is with Saturn and Rahu, then one suffers from very deep depressive thoughts and may also have dangerous thoughts regarding oneself. If the Moon, Saturn and Mars combine or are adversely connected, then one is very violent in one's behavior and there can be homicidal tendencies lurking in such a person. If the Moon and Mercury are together or in mutual aspect, then there is unhealthy thinking, one is manipulated. But if this affliction, Moon-Mercury connection is badly afflicted, then one becomes very dangerous and can be prone to crime. In fact, previous Moon-Mercury. In fact, there is a Sanskrit sloka which says Buddha Chandra Kendra Gato na Anyagraha Samyito na Pratidrusto Yogosham Paishachastu Tatra Utpannon Madi. That means if the Moon and Mercury are in mutual angles and not influenced by any planets nor their lords, then it leads to Paishacha Yoga or demonic nature. This yoga is generally found in the charts of maniacs, psychopaths, tyrants, political tyrants, military dictators, and makes one megalomaniacal, and also one can suffer from schizophrenia of a dangerous order. So that's it. So the Moon and Mercury, when in mutual angles, if not supported by any benefic or stabilizing influences, then they can make one prone to unhealthy mindsets. The Mercury, we should remember, rules buddhi or the intellect, and his position in the chart is of great help in ascertaining the kind of delusion one may suffer from. If Moon conjoins Saturn, one broods too much about the past and one is also manipulative. If Mercury is afflicted by Venus, one lives in a fool's paradise, never understanding the reality around him. If Mercury is afflicted by Mars, one is mechanical, unfeeling, and logical. We should remember, if in a chart the afflictions center on the ascendant, then one is prone to disease of the body. If the afflictions center on the Moon, one is prone to disease of the mind. In such a case, in the case of an afflicted Moon, if Mars is also involved, then one develops a persecution complex. He is always suffers from imaginary grievances and always plays the victim card. Therefore, by carefully analyzing the ascendant and the Moon and the afflictions they suffer from, the disease one may be vulnerable can be avoided or at least rendered less serious. Now, how dangerous an afflicted Moon-Mercury combination can be is illustrated in this chart. Of course, this is an extreme case, and I would suggest you do not look into your own charts for this combination. Now, the facts of the case. The native was a simple, docile-looking woman, very attractive and comely in appearance, Virgo is usually a sign where appearance is good. It is aspected by the moon, which also gives good features by Mercury and the sun. So it gave her a physically attractive personality. She was convicted of several murders and sentenced to death. In May 1971, her husband died when she collected a huge sum in insurance. Later, two of her houses got burned when also she connected fire insurance money on these two houses. In January 1978, she moved into another house with a new boyfriend. In May 1980, one of her sons died in a drowning accident. In June 1980, another son survived lead and arsenic poisoning when the whole truth came tumbling out. All the accidents and deaths were engineered by the woman with an eye on insurance money. You could take a relook at the chart and you find the seventh house has Moon and Mercury together. The ascendant lord is Mercury and he is afflicted by the moon in a watery sign. And you will find the moon is the 11th lord. Moon is the manas. Moon is the mind. Therefore, as 11th lord, and the afflicted moon made her mind always dwell on what money or monetary profit she could get from any means, by any means and every means. So, therefore, by carefully analyzing a chart, the ascendant and the moon especially, one can identify the kind of problem one can suffer from, either at the physical level or the mental level. The chart, we must remember, and this was always emphasized by Dr. Raman, is only a picture of tendencies, and through right effort, the tendencies can be modified to some extent. Coming to bodily disease, astrology recognizes a close link between the body and the mind. And all diseases in astrology are classified as Nija and Agantaka. So, Nija diseases have an internal origin. Agantaka diseases have and are due to external agencies. Now, going back to Nija diseases, they are of two kinds, Sharirotta and Chittotta. Sharirotta diseases are caused due to the imbalance in the three humors of Ayurveda, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and also due to an imbalance of the combinations of these three humors of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Now, Chittotta diseases have a mental origin, and the origin is from the Arishadvargas. As most of you may be aware, Arishadvargas are defined as our internal enemies. They spring within us and are Kama, Krodha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. And when there is an excess of one of these Arishadvargas, then we become sick. And this sickness can also reflect in our bodies. So Sharirotta diseases, you must note, can be identified by considering the sixth house and afflictions to it. Sixth house, you know, is the Rogasthana. Chittota diseases are caused by variations in the different passions of the human mind and have their origin in disturbed conditions of the Arishad Vargas. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, and Mada. Kama is craving basically for pleasure. Krodha is wrath. Lobha is greed. Moha is infatuation. Mada is arrogance. Matsarya is jealousy. Chittota diseases originate in frustration involving one or more of these emotions and are to be treated from the and are to be traced from the fifth house. In the chart of the lady we just saw, we find there is Mars in the fifth house. What does Mars signify? Wrath and greed, Lobha. This element, this Arishad Varga was very strong in the woman, and Mars occupies her fifth house of emotions, and this was the driving force behind her all acts of crime by her. Now, Chittota diseases, again we go back to the law of karma and the theory of rebirth, may have an origin in this time frame or from a past time frame, that is from a past birth, and assume force if the human passions are allowed to go unbridled. If malefics occupy the fifth house, if the malefic is Mars, then the emotion that is disturbed is excessive anger, jealousy, greed, and this we have seen in chart 6. If it is Venus, it is sexual frustration or infatuation. If it is Jupiter, it is avarice for money, for honor, for recognition. And if it is Saturn, it is wrath and malice, vindictiveness, and revengeful feelings. Now, Agantika diseases are acquired by factors that are external to the body. And these are of two kinds, Drishti Nimittija, or of known or visible causes. They can be due to curses, incantations, false, accidents, attacks, injury, and always from external sources. Adrishta Nimittija is also from external sources, and it is from unseen or unknown causes such as curses and evil spirits. This is open to some question because this is an age when people don't believe in evil spirits, but belief is not everything. The evil spirits may be mischievous and going about doing their mischief. So, Adrishta Nimittija diseases can be caused due to evil spirits also. Many people complain of hearing voices even though there is no one else in the room. And this is also one instance of Adrishta Nimittija. If the sixth house and the eighth house are related, then the intensity or the severity of the condition will be very high. Medical keys. Many times, modern systems of medicine lead to wrong diagnosis and wrong treatment, including unnecessary surgeries that could lead to tragedies, compounded by also financial disaster. A careful analysis of the chart can equip one with better insights to handle disease and treatment. Everyone knows an ECC may not give the right picture, and this is what almost all cardiologists also know, but they will never concede it. That is why it is said, Vaidya Raja Namastubhyam Yamaraja Sahodara Yamastu Harati Pranan Vaidyaha Pranandana Cha. I'm sure you can all follow what this means. While Yamaraja, or the god of death, takes away only your prana or life, his younger brother, the doctor, takes away both your life and your money. Now, modern science holds everything: our health, longevity, looks, appearance, taste, our talents, even our intelligence, habits, as being dictated by our genes. Do we have any choice on which genes we want when we are born? No, we don't have any choice. Then in that case, when we have no choice in deciding what genes we want, and if the genes we are born with decide our health, skills, intelligence, looks, everything, does it not mean everything is predetermined? According to science, if you get the intelligence gene, you are intelligent. If you get the alcohol addiction gene, you become an alcoholic. So where is the scope for free will? This is modern science and it advocates fatalism. But astrology emphasizes human effort and faith in God. And that is why Father would always recall this line from the scriptures which says, Purusha Karena Vina Daivam na Siddhyate. Without effort, what is ordained may also not materialize. The list of areas where astrology gives insights which no other discipline does is endless. In brief, astrology is an important and invaluable science through which you not only take control of your present, but also plan your future. Especially when it comes to surgeries and medical treatment, you must remember some of our scriptural sayings. There is one which says, Vyadhe Tattva Parignanam Vedanayashcha Nigraha. Etat Vaidyasya Vaidyatvam. Now Vaidyaha Purusha Prabhurayushaha. That is, Vaidyatvam, or being a physician or a doctor, consists of understanding the nature of the Vyadi and relieving one of Vedana or suffering. The doctor or physician, mind you, is not the Lord or has no control over life. Na Prabhurayushaha. And this is, the doctor is emphasized as not being the Lord of Ayus or longevity. In other words, he cannot extend life, he can only give relief until death, but he cannot push off death. We should remember this when seeking medical advice. In fact, Bhishma says in the Mahabharata, quote, as a minute spark of fire increases in size when a blast of wind blows over it, so divine aid, when effectively supported by human effort, brings a large increase of fruit. As by the decrease of oil, the light becomes dimmer, so by the diminution of effort, divine aid grows less effective. Now, at the root of all free will, which is a function of the mind, is the position of the moon. When you talk of free will, it is the exercising of mind power or mental strength. The importance of Chandra Lagna has always been emphasized in all classical works when they say that the Chandra Lagna is as important as the Udaya Lagna, but in interpreting the horoscope and judging yogas. It is always said, not only should you assess the horoscope with reference to the Udaya Lagna or rising sign or ascendant, but also take a look at it with reference to the moon as a pivotal point. If the Udaya Lagna or rising sign can be said to show fate, the Chandra Lagna or moon sign can be taken to stand for free will. The moon is the Manahkaraka and the moon sign shows the conscious effort that can be put forth to handle a certain astrological affliction or dosha and its results. If you go back to Newton's laws of motion, which you must have learned in either high school or a little later in college, it says it allows an external force to change the inertia, that is the state of rest or of uniform motion of a body. Likewise, the law of karma also says a certain karmic condition can be altered through effort, which has to be initiated first in the mind before it can take tangible result, tangible shape externally in some way. You know, according to Newton's laws of motion, it allows for an external force to change the inertia of the body. Otherwise, a body continues in a state of rest or of uniform motion. But when you apply an external force, it can change the direction or its speed. Likewise, the law of karma too allows, by the proper exercise of free will, a change in the results that the horoscope promises. So being alert to karmic conditions in advance helps one handle them better. Depending on the nature of the affliction, it can be augmented, neutralized, or counteracted according to the strength of mind the native possesses or has developed and the resources available to him. Now, talking of one's mental strength, the moon rules the mind. The moon role in the horoscope is very important, and we must keep going back to it all the time. Our moon usually gives one certain positive traits such as optimism, grit, and perseverance. Such natives automatically tend to work hard, fight obstacles, and not get bogged down by obstacles and impediments. But suppose the moon is weak and blemished, then such a native has certain inherent drawbacks: moodiness, self-pity, diffidence, lack of motivation, and he has to overcome these traits if he wants to succeed. So when such a native is apprised of these drawbacks, he can consciously work at overcoming them. But if at the same time the moon gets benefic aspects, the native, though initially endowed with some negative traits, they learn in the face of circumstances to overcome them and forge ahead to achieve their goals. Now we have so far covered Samhita and Jataka. We will now move on to Muhurta. Now, the very fact that there is a branch such as Muhurta or electional astrology bears ample testimony to the indicative nature of Jyotisha. What is a Muhurta? A Muhurta is a time segment rendered powerful by the planetary positions at the time in such a manner as to aid the success of a venture or project begun then. There are muhurtas for good work such as marriage, opening of business, industries, housewarming, etc., even surgery. And there are muhurtas to aid destructive activity such as wars, arson, demolition of buildings, clearing of forests, shaving hair, and so on. Now, according to Satyacharya, if things are done in appropriate and auspicious times according to the rules of Muhurta, only the benefit results due to our past karma would be derived. The impending evil karma, if any, would not ordinarily have the chance to manifest itself in actual life. In fact, some of the yogas, bad yogas, if due pariharams are done and they are done properly, cannot be totally destroyed. The adverse yogas, they will then be experienced in dreams, which while they last, make you suffer just as when you are awake. And then the same principle that Satyacharya enumerates is given in different ways in different classical works. For example, Prashnamarga says, what is done at an auspicious moment results in happiness. What is done at an inauspicious time begets evil. And this you must remember very carefully. However remote our deeds, the results are bound to be experienced in the family. Now, the first part of the sloka is very simple and it states happiness is the result of the action done at an auspicious time, and evil flows from action done at an inauspicious time. Now, what makes time auspicious or inauspicious? It is the planetary position, then that determine the time of an act as auspicious or otherwise, which is what Muhurta Shastra is all about. Now, in other words, favorable planetary positions produce good. Unfavorable planetary positions produce evil. This is basically the essence of Jyotisha, whether it is natal horoscopy or Prashna or Muhurta. So now talking about Muhurta. When a Muhurta is chosen, the primary factors are what are known as Nakshatra Bala and Chandra Bala. That is, the nakshatra and the moon sign in the electional chart should be in harmony with the birth nakshatra and the birth moon. That is, the moon again becomes extremely important, natal as well as at the time of the action. The natal moon as Manahkaraka and ruling the mind can be taken as the index of free will. Therefore, by yoking the natal moon to the Muhurta moon in a favorable way, that is using Muhurta principle, we are harnessing free will, providing safe passage to the action or activity that is initiated thus to move towards fulfillment and success. Now, the second part of the sloka from Prashnamarga says that the karma we carry from past birth is experienced not only by us but also our descendants. That is why when the chart of a small child is brought before an astrologer, he will refuse to examine it unless it is an emergency, whether it may be a health emergency or a missing child case. The reason is, according to Parashara, the child's life is greatly influenced not by its own karma, of which the chart is a blueprint, but by the actions of its mother and father till it crosses the age of 8 years. Some classical works extend this period to the 12th year also. That is why, traditionally, the role of parents is deemed to be a great responsibility, not merely social, financial, or legal, but more of a moral nature, when they should be cognizant of the karmic fact that their actions will have a strong influence on the fate or destiny of their young progeny, and therefore they have to exercise caution at every stage and strive to consciously stick to dharma or the path of righteousness at all times. Finding auspicious moments defined by planetary positions is Muhurta. The main role of Muhurta is to reduce impediments and obstacles in the way of fulfilling our objective through the act or venture initiated then. But we must also remember what is not promised in the birth chart cannot be had even with the best of Muhurtas. What is promised in the horoscope, a Muhurta can aid by making the passage for its realization smooth and easy. The importance given to the moon in Muhurta at every stage can be because the moon ruling the mind should be favorably disposed, both in a general sense and also with respect to one's own Janma Nakshatra. When this is done, the individual mind receives help an impetus from the transiting moon to pursue the activity with greater vigor and zest and in the right direction. The last may be said to be in the sense of being prompted to move along the path where one's best interests lie and help in making right decisions. According to Satyacharya again, I would say, if things are done at auspicious times, then only benefic results due to our karma are tapped. The evil karma, if any, would not have the chance to manifest under such a muhurta. That is, in other words, the good karma at our credit is helped to sprout better with the help of the moon, the manahkaraka or the mind, and therefore free will. There is a constant battle or tug of war between fate and free will every moment of our life, irrespective of whether we are aware of it or not. And therefore, it is our bounden duty to exercise free will properly to help diffuse, dilute, or negate the adverse part of fate. And as we have seen, it is the mind, it is the moon, the mind, the motivation, the exertion that proceeds from us, which will finally influence the result. This is then how we have to understand the importance of the moon in our chart. When the moon or our mind has so much hidden power, how can one interpret horoscopes deterministically? This sloka, which we used to carry in the Astrological magazine and which continues to appear in our own journal too, Palani Grahacharena Suchiyanti Manishinaha Kovakta Taratamyasya Tamekam Vedasam Vina, meaning man can only indicate results based on the planetary movements. Who else but the Creator can say with certainty what will definitely happen? This sloka highlights not only the indicative nature of astrology as a suchi, but also the limitations of the astrologer. We as astrologers should remember we cannot play God. Throughout, the text use the word suchi or indication, emphasizing over and over again, we can, to a large extent, gauge trends, and that it is only God who can say with certainty what exactly will happen. We cannot play God, but since the planets indicate the trends, not the actualities, trends can be qualified through prayer and right effort. According to Mantreshwara, Paludipika, Hamsikasya Dantasya Dharmarjita Dhanasya cha Sarvadanemastasya Tadadanam Graha Graha. To one who causes no harm, Ahamsikasya Dantasya, to one who is restrained in behavior and conduct, to one who earns wealth through righteous means, Dharmarjita Dhanasya cha, to one whose conduct is regulated by fairness and principles of natural justice, Sarvada Niyamastasya, Sada Anugraha Graha, favorable results always accrue, or planets extend a protective umbrella. Friends, I hope I have been able to give you at least a broad picture of the scope of astrology as a tool of foreknowledge and with limitless potentiality for application. And I believe that most of you will already be aware of these details. I'm very thankful to Shukla ji for giving me this opportunity, and I'm even more thankful to him for captaining the ICAS and making it so vibrant and dynamic. I should thank him from the bottom of my heart. I also thank all the ICASian members for their patient hearing, and I would be failing in my duty if I did not mention that today's presentation would not have been possible but for our Bangalore Chapter 3 Chairman, Sri Vishwanath Holla's help in getting the PowerPoint ready. My sincere thanks to you, Mr. Vishwanath. I also thank the National President Shukla ji and his innovative idea of holding webinars every week. which is a great way to keep the torch of ICAS and of Jyotisha burning bright. I also thank all of you for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was indeed a lecture, I should say, one in all, because almost all the topics have been touched upon. And particularly so, I would like to mention only two things. One is that in Delhi, it has started raining and today is Amavasya. I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow because Delhi is not ready for a fortnight rainfall. So that was one thing. And then you reminded about this particular quote that Vaidiraja Namastubhyam Yamarajas Sahodara Yamastu Harti Pranani Vaidya Harti Vaidya Pranam Dhananicha. So this was something which always we used to quote in introductory classes, because this is one thing which help us in reinstating this fact that astrology is equally a great science as the medical sciences. So I will now call upon Mr. Vishwanath Hola to present vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are coming to the last activity of the session. So we are thankful to Sri Pramendra Chaturvedi ji, chapter chairman of Gwalior chapter, for his invocation. So it was very vibrative start, sir. So thank you very much. We are also thankful to our honorary national president, Guru Shri B Shukla ji, for his inaugural address. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You have been instrumental in spearheading the organization and even starting with the webinar series. So you have been very inspiring personality for all of us. We are also thankful to today's speaker, Madam Gayatri Devi Vasudev, honorary Senior National Vice President of ICAS, for enlightening all through by sharing your rich experience in astrology, which he has inherited by Dr. B.V. Raman. We are also thankful to all our vice presidents, office bearers, chapter chairmen, and controller of examination team, including controller of examination, for their support all through for making this celebration grand success. So I thank each and everyone who participated in this webinar. We do have a series of webinars starting from next Saturday. So we will join from next Saturday on a weekly basis. So do visit our website or our Facebook to click the link and join the sessions. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Very much, Vishwanath ji, and let's wait for 10:30 next Saturday for the next lecture of the webinar. Thank you.